Greg and I got along probably as well and better than any other two people in the band. You go crashing people. But when he got sick, I called him about every other day. He was really, really sick.
He was once fired from the very band he helped create, arrested for pointing a gun at his wife, screamed in drunken rage backstage, then stepped onto stage the next morning and played a piece so beautiful it left the entire room in silence. That was Dickey Betts, the untamable artist of the American South, the man who wrote Rambling Man, the only Allman Brothers band hit to break into Billboard Top 10, the composer behind Jessica, a wordless symphony that forced the world to recognize Southern rock as a genre with true emotional depth, and also the man who burned every bridge, friendships, marriages, reputations, just to live and play music the way he believed was right. If Duane Allman was a fallen angel of the Allman Brothers Band, then Betts was a living soul, wounded, rebellious, and impossible to control. He played guitar like he was telling his own life story. No words needed, just one riff, and you could feel the loneliness, longing, and torment stitched into every note. This is a journey of Dickey Betts, a genius without restraint, a rebel who never backed down, an artist whose music still breathes even after he quietly left us in 2024. And are you sure you truly understand a legend just by hearing a song? Early life. Dickey Betts was born on December 12, 1943, in West Palm Beach, Florida, but that wasn't where he was shaped. He grew up in Bradenton, a small agricultural town on the southwestern coast of Florida, where orange groves stretched endlessly, dirt roads kicked up red dust, and time seemed to flow more slowly. His family wasn't wealthy or prestigious, but there was always one thing in the air: the music of the American South. His father, a quiet, hard-drinking man who worked odd jobs, played mandolin and banjo at local gatherings. His mother loved swing music and often turned on the radio while cooking. Betts grew up in a home where Bill Monroe, Hank Williams, and the Carter family were daily companions, where music wasn't a distant dream, but something that lived right there on the front porch. At 6, Betts picked up his first instrument, a ukulele, and then gradually moved on to fiddle, mandolin, and banjo. But it wasn't until he touched his first electric guitar, borrowed from a neighbor, that he knew this was destiny. Every afternoon, Lil Dicky would take the guitar out to the porch and play the same melodies he heard on the radio over and over again. No one taught him to read music. He learned by ear and by feeling. From a young age, he showed the spirit of an artist, not the dreamy, delicate kind, but the street-smart kind who clings to music like a means of survival. Just as early, his rebellious, stubborn, untamable nature became clear. Betts couldn't stand rules. He once quit a church music class because they forced him to play by the book. "I don't play music to be told I'm in tune. I play to feel alive," he once said in a rare interview about his childhood. There were no massive family tragedies, but Betts's childhood wasn't peaceful. He grew up in a culture where men were taught to be tough, resilient, and never vulnerable. Emotions, if any, would be poured into a glass or a fist. But Betts chose another path. He poured his emotions into the guitar. That was the only place he was allowed to be soft, to remember, to hurt, to dream without shame. At 16, he dropped out of school, not because he failed, but because school didn't teach him what he needed. He began playing in local bands, the Jokers, the Soul Children, the Second Coming, traveling through bars, clubs, and county fairs across the Tampa Bay area. He once said, "I played a bar where the customers brought guns, but no one shot while I played Sweet Home Alabama. They just listened. That's when I knew I could survive with music." No one at the time could have guessed that the long-haired kid from Bradenton who wore leather jackets and high boots was carrying the seeds of a musical revolution, a genre that didn't yet have a name, a style of guitar playing that had never been defined. But Betts didn't need a label. All he needed was a guitar, a stage, and a bit of southern wind brushing his collar after each song ended. Southern rock hadn't been born yet, but its soul was already growing. In the scorching Florida summers, in the early drunken nights, in the first riffs Dickey Betts played on a borrowed guitar, the spirit had already begun to sing. Early career. Before the name Dickey Betts ever appeared on the cover of Southern Rock Legends, he was just a hired gun playing guitar in bar bands, local touring acts, and dive joints where his music often had to compete with the sound of beer bottles popping in drunken laughter. But it was in those dusty, rough-edged venues that he sharpened his instincts. places without studios, without sound engineers, where music either lived or died in the moment. In the 1960s, Betts played with groups like the Jokers, and then the Second Coming, a psychedelic rock band based in Florida, where he began experimenting with dual harmonies and extended improvisation. None of the band members were famous, but in the Southern underground scene, Betts quickly earned a reputation as a guitarist like no other. He played rock soaked in jazz, blues with a twist of country, and above all, he knew how to turn a solo into a story. It was during this period that Betts met the man who would change his fate, Barry Oakley, a young bassist known for his powerful groove. Oakley became not just a close friend, but the bridge that led Betts to two brothers who were searching for something bigger, Duane and Greg Allman. In 1969, after a failed run with the band Hourglass in California, Duane Allman returned to the South determined to form a new kind of band, something that pushed past traditional blues but didn't quite fit into rock. After just one jam session, Duane knew he had found the right man. Betts and Allman weren't alike, but they completed each other. One was bold and sharp, the other introspective and soulful. They didn't play to outshine one another. They played like two halves of a single spirit, moving side by side, blending without clashing. With Greg Allman vocals, keys, Barry Oakley bass, and drummers Butch Trucks and Jai Johanni Jaimo Johansson, the new band officially formed in March 1969 in Jacksonville, Florida. They named themselves the Allman Brothers Band since Duane had sparked the idea. But from the beginning, Dickey Betts was an irreplaceable pillar. To Betts, this wasn't just a band. It was a second family, a place where he didn't have to restrain his impulses, where he could play 10-minute solos without anyone cutting him off. On stage, he and Duane pioneered guitar harmonies, melodic lines intertwining like two rivers, a sound that would become the unmistakable hallmark of Southern rock. The debut album, The Allman Brothers Band, 1969, wasn't a commercial success, but critics praised it. The track in memory of Elizabeth Reed, composed by Betts with a jazz-influenced structure, quickly became one of the band's live masterpieces. It was Betts' first declaration. He wasn't just a guitarist. He was a storyteller in sound. In a rock world torn between California psychedelia and the British invasion, the Allman Brothers Band, underpinned by Betts' quiet architecture, forged a third path, bringing the grit, the melancholy, and the pride of the American South onto the stage. From the 20-minute jams at Fillmore East to the poetic riffs in songs like Dreams and Revival, Dickey Betts helped open a brand new chapter in American rock music. His career was just beginning, but Betts was no longer a hired hand. He was now part of a legend in the making. Career success. In 1971, when Duane Allman died in a motorcycle accident, the Allman Brothers Band was left in shock. The band had lost its leader. A musical brotherhood had been torn apart. And though no one said it out loud, all eyes turned to Dickey Betts. No one was truly ready, but Betts knew either he stepped up or the band would fall apart. And he did step up, not with loud declarations, but with guitar that spoke louder than ever before. In Duane's absence, Betts didn't just take over lead guitar duties. He began writing more, playing longer, and singing more, gradually leading the band from grief to commercial peak. In 1973, Brothers and Sisters was released with Betts as its creative soul. He wrote Jessica, a 7-minute instrumental with no vocals, no lyrics, but overflowing with feeling. It wasn't just a song. It was a guitar conversation where he expressed his longing for Duane, his joy in becoming a father, and his belief in a kind of music that could outlive loss. But the moment that truly solidified Dickey Betts as a legend was Rambling Man, a song he wrote, sang, and turned into band's first and only top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Not only was it the most commercially successful Southern rock song ever released, it was also a brilliant pivot, bringing in country rock sensibilities that were both accessible and complex enough to preserve artistic integrity. From 1973 to 1976, the Allman Brothers Band dominated America's biggest stages. Dickey Betts wasn't just a guitarist. He was a chief songwriter, the main voice, and at times the glue holding the band together, while Greg Allman sank into heroin and legal troubles. At the same time, Betts began to feel like the band was becoming a cage, one that limited his creativity under the ever-present shadow of the Allman name. So, in 1974, he released his first solo album, Highway Call. It was a surprising turn. No long jam band solos, no Southern Electric blues, just a humble, rootsy blend of folk country jazz, full of fiddle and steel guitar. For the first time, the public saw a different side of Betts. Gentle, wandering, sitting on a wooden porch playing acoustic guitar with a quiet smile. Betts didn't stop there. In 1977, he founded his own band, Dickey Betts and Great Southern. Albums like Great Southern, 1977, and Atlanta's Burning Down, 1978, showed he had no interest in being a replica of himself. He stepped away from the Allman sound and even from fan expectations to play what he called Americana before the word even existed. During this time, Betts toured relentlessly, mentored young guitarists, and passed on his style of twin harmony and rare live improvisation. He became a true band leader, not through media hype or scandal, but with guitar and a loyal group of musicians. In the 1980s and 1990s, when the Allman Brothers reunited, Betts remained a core songwriter, but never gave up his leadership role with Great Southern. In the late 90s, he led the group through the retro rock era, keeping Southern rock alive in every show and every 20-minute live jam. In 2000, he reformed Great Southern and released several live albums like Live at the Odeon and Instant Live, praised by critics even if they didn't reach mass popularity. Never pandering, never chasing trends, never play what a crowd wanted. Betts played what he had to play. In 2018, after several years of retirement, he announced a return to the stage, this time with his son, Dwayne Betts, in a tour widely regarded as a passing of the torch. Dwayne played guitar like his father, but with a calmer presence. Their performance at that year's Peach Festival was seen as the last time audiences would witness the Southern guitar soul blaze on stage, but now with two generations setting it alight. Not long after, Dickey Betts suffered a brain hemorrhage. His recovery was slow, and he eventually stepped away from performing entirely. But what mattered most, he never left music. Across 5 decades, from bar bands to sold-out Fillmore shows, from center stage with the Allman Brothers to solitary journeys with Great Southern, Betts proved one truth. Music doesn't need approval. It only needs honesty. And Dickey Betts lived and played as if it were the only thing left worth believing in. Scandals and tragedy. Some artists fade because they lack talent, others because they lack opportunity. But in Dickey Betts' case, it was a tragedy of having too much talent trapped inside an ego that no one, not even himself, could tame. By the 1990s, Betts had begun spiraling, lost in alcohol and the feeling of being cornered by the very legacy he helped create. He didn't drink to celebrate. He drank to quiet something inside, a pain that Dwayne Allman's twin guitar used to soothe. But after Dwayne's death, nothing else could reach. The band had become a massive machine, and Betts, a free spirit, found himself crushed beneath schedules, performances, expectations, and the pressure to live up to a brand that had long boxed him in. He grew angry, he drank, and sometimes he disappeared without a word. In 1996, he was arrested at a strip club for refusing to leave after causing a disturbance. His face landed on the front page with a headline, "From Fillmore to Jail, Dickey Betts Back in Trouble Again." Fans began to divide. Some said he needed help. Others were blunt. Betts is destroying the Allman legacy. Nothing compared to the implosion in 2000. After weeks of unexplained absences, backstage tension, and erratic behavior during rehearsals, Dickey Betts received the one thing no musician ever wants, a fax. That was how the Allman Brothers Band fired him. No meeting, no phone call, no one look him in the eye, just a piece of paper sent to his home informing him the band would continue the summer tour without him. The man who wrote Ramblin' Man, the band's biggest hit, the one who kept the Allman Brothers alive after Dwayne's death, the one who once called Greg Allman my brother on stage, was now removed from the very band he helped create by fax. He didn't stay quiet. Sued. The media swarmed. Fans drew lines. Some sided with Greg, others with Dickey. Some called it one of the greatest betrayals in American rock. Others called it a fitting end for a man who couldn't control himself. As for Betts, he simply said, "I wasn't the problem. I was the reason they still existed." Not long after, the Allman Brothers continued touring, but without Jessica, without Blue Sky, without that wild, unpredictable edge. They were tighter, more polished, and missing something only Betts could bring: the sense that the music was being played by someone who had survived. In the years that followed, Betts toured with his own band, but the old spark never quite returned. Audiences grew smaller. The press stopped writing about him. Those who once stood beside him now stood on the other side of silence. He still played Jessica, the Grammy-winning instrumental, but now it wasn't a joyful anthem. It was an echo, a monologue from someone the world had forgotten. Betts didn't die from an overdose. He didn't go insane. He didn't take his own life. But in an industry where artists are loved for being timely and discarded for the same reason, he became a shadow of himself even while still alive, still playing, still singing. The tragedy of Dickey Betts wasn't a single accident, a gunshot, or a fall. His tragedy was slow, relentless, and deeply painful, a realization that the world he helped build had moved on and left no room for him. And he lived with it, silently, bitterly, quietly, carrying his guitar forward. No apologies, no begging, no looking back. Personal life. But as time went on and Betts sank deeper into alcohol and drugs, their shared life turned into something more like a battlefield. The most shocking incident came in 1996, when Donna called the police to their home. In the report, she claimed Betts, after using heroin and cocaine, had pointed a revolver at her head in a fit of rage. The case was never prosecuted, as Donna refused to testify, but the event left a permanent scar on his private life. In 2017, Donna herself was arrested for aiming a gun at a group of school children playing sports near their home, a scandal that resurfaced the family's history of violence. Still, Betts never left her. They remained together until the end. In a strange way, like two survivors in the same trench, even if there were no more battles left to win. Amid failed marriages and relentless turmoil, one thing Betts never wavered on was his love for his children, especially his son Dwayne Betts, named in honor of Dwayne Allman, the musical brother Betts once called a soulmate in music. Dickey Betts was the kind of artist no one could control, and in love, he was the kind of man no one could hold on to for long. Betts went through 5 marriages. Each woman who entered his life seemed to follow the same cycle. Drawn in by the fire of his passion and talent, mesmerized by the tender spontaneity that emerged when he held a guitar, and eventually worn down by his impulsiveness, sudden anger, and the long, cold silences that followed his drinking binges. The early wives were rarely public figures, but those who lived close to him said that when Betts loved, he loved with brutal honesty, giving not just his heart but also his recklessness to the other person, holding nothing back. And perhaps because of that, each of his early marriages ended in divorce, tears, and courtrooms filled with bitter words. His 4th marriage marked a turning point. He married Donna Betts, a strong-willed woman who was not easily intimidated. Donna wasn't just a wife. She was his companion on the road through the late 80s and 90s. She once worked as his tour manager, and even fought with him on stage, demanding he put down the bottle before a show. In the early years, they were like two warriors, one a fiery artist, the other an uncompromising woman. Dwayne Betts wasn't just a son, he was a successor. From the way he played, wrote, and carried himself on stage, Dwayne seemed to channel the young Dickey, the one still full of dreams, not yet crushed by reality. Betts was never a warm, outwardly affectionate father. He didn't say, "I love you" in public. But when the two shared the stage in 2018, performing Blue Sky and Rambler Man, the way Betts looked at Dwayne, with pride and quiet emotion, said everything that needed to be said. After suffering a stroke in 2022, Betts withdrew almost completely from the spotlight. Donna cared for him, and Dwayne carried the family's musical torch. In his final months, Betts no longer performed, no longer fought, and was no longer torn by the burden of fame. He lived quietly, surrounded by a small family, watching his son continue the journey he once began. Dickey Betts was not a perfect man. He failed with women. He hurt people he loved. He destroyed relationships that once seemed unbreakable. But he never hid from any of it. In love as in music, he was always honest. And that raw, thorny honesty, though it may not have brought lasting happiness, made him a real, unforgettable human being. Not just to fans, but to those who loved him, left him, and ultimately stayed. Legacy and influence. Dickey Betts never needed a formal tribute show or repeated Billboard rankings to prove his worth. He left behind an irreplaceable legacy in the history of American rock, especially Southern rock. As the primary songwriter of Ramblin' Man, he didn't just write a hit. He wrote an anthem for the Free South, a song in which every American with rural roots could see a reflection of themselves. When Jessica plays the Grammy-winning instrumental, you don't just hear a guitar. You see an open sky, an endless journey, and the soul of a wanderer who belongs nowhere except within the music. Betts was the first to blend a Gibson Les Paul guitar with 5-string banjo, phrasing, and traditional blues. Structures creating a signature style Southern rock soaked in jazz and country. When he and Duane Allman played dual guitar, it wasn't a duel, it was two souls moving as one later artists like Warren Haynes, Derek Trucks, Charlie Starr, Blackberry Smoke, and even John Mayer have cited Betts as a model of American guitar playing defined by grit and grace. He was also one of the few artists to survive all of the Allman Brothers Band's internal upheavals, from sudden deaths to legal feuds, while preserving the Southern essence in every composition. None of his songs relied on stage effect, electronic gimmicks, or production tricks. Betts told stories through his guitar, and audiences understood every word. His influence wasn't just technical. It was a philosophy, a way of life played from the heart and never compromised to be liked. In an era where the market dictates every product Dickey, Betts was a man who dared to reject the trend to hold on, to rawness, to allow flaws so long as they were reeled at. Honesty made him a symbol for independent musicians everywhere. Perhaps the most valuable legacy Betts left behind doesn't live on vinyl, but in the breath of the next generation, his son Duane. Betts doesn't just carry the name of a legend, he plays music the way his father did, with passion, Southern pride. And not a trace of pretense. Duane and the Allman Betts Band now carry the brightest torch for Southern rock, extending Dickey Betts' influence into the 21st century without diluting its identity. No grand statements, no autobiography. Dickey Betts left a musical legacy that says everything: complex yet free, fierce yet emotional, deeply personal yet capable of touching millions. And with every note of blue sky that still rings out, that legacy continues to live, breathe, and grow without him needing to be there. Final years after suffering a stroke in 2018 that required emergency brain surgery, Dickey Betts never returned to the stage. He lived quietly at his home in Osprey, Florida, a bayfront house where the sound of waves replaced applause, and the guitar by his bedside became his final companion. He no longer toured, no longer stood under stage lights, but he kept his habit of sitting silently for hours on the porch, gazing out over the water where he used to fish in his younger days. Neighbors recalled seeing him humming old tunes, mumbling melodies that were never released, and sometimes sitting for hours without saying a word, as if he were having a conversation with someone long gone. On April 18th, 2024, Dickey Betts passed away after a long battle with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and cognitive decline. He died exactly where he had chosen to live out the rest of his life, surrounded by his wife, children, grandchildren, and the undying echoes of music. He was 80 years old. There was no grand memorial, no outpouring of celebrity tweets, but to those who truly loved music, it was a day America lost the last honest voice of the Southern guitar. His legacy wasn't fame. It was musical integrity, something not every artist has the courage to preserve. He never compromised, never chased trends, never changed his style to be liked, and he never came back to apologize for the past. He lived, created, loved, rebelled, and mourned on his own terms. And then he withdrew like a weary nomad, without fanfare, without asking for tribute. Dickey Betts was never easy to love in music or in life. He was complex, impulsive, easily misunderstood, but for those patient enough to truly listen, there was a quiet honesty in every note he played, in every decision he made, even when they turned out to be mistakes. He didn't build an empire. He didn't create a brand. He left behind no grand manifesto. But he left something else: the sound of the Southern guitar, not loud, not polished, but so full of emotion it made you stop in your tracks. In an age where everything must be perfect, staged, and viral to exist, Betts chose to live as a man out of time. He kept the flaws, the tangles, the scars in his melodies, because only with those intact could the music truly be real. And if today you listen to Rambling Man or Blue Sky, pay just a little more attention somewhere in the solo, you'll feel the presence of a man who wasn't chasing immortality. He was simply following the call of freedom. Have you ever listened to Dickey Betts' music during a special moment in your life? Share it in the comments, because music isn't just sound, it's memory, it's emotion. It's the final trace left behind by those who are gone. See you again in the next story, where every artist has their own way of living and of never being forgotten.